Secretary Besson, how can you square your concern with fiscal health with deficit finance growth for families that need those tax cuts least?
Senator, I'll begin with that we did not get here. We inherited this fiscal situation that I believe.
Well, you inherited from Donald Trump, who was here. You did, Mr. Besson.
No,
yes,
sir.
you did, Mr. Besson.
No,
you inherited from Donald Trump. He's the first president to come back after a 4-year hiatus, after we know exactly what the last tax cuts did, which was blow a massive hole in our deficit and debt. You can't sit here and lie about that. It's true.
This hearing wasn't just tense, it was a turning point. Senator Bennet confronted Trump-era economic spin with facts that couldn't be dodged, exposing exactly how the deficit ballooned. Moments like this matter because democracy can't survive on denial. Our opponents are organized. Subscribe now and let's get to work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming in today. And thanks for having this hearing. Secretary Besson, the last time you were here, I asked you about your emphasis on domestic discretionary funding in your opening statement. You had stated, quote, "We must adjust federal domestic discretionary spending to get our fiscal house in order while striking an urgent tone on our growing deficit." I mentioned to you then that domestic discretionary spending is only 15% of our budget. And I think if you were serious about deficit reduction, you might not push for tax cuts that almost certainly could not be offset by discretionary adjustments alone. And now, of course, we know you can't. Today, we actually have the details of your plan. Take health care from 10 million Americans, 126,000 Coloradans. Cut nutrition assistance for millions of adults. Sunset clean energy investments that are so critical to the American West. Give over 40% of the tax benefits of this bill to the top 5%. And it's not even close to being paid for. Even my colleagues on the Republican side, who for years and years and years have claimed to be the fiscally responsible party, now are admitting that it's not paid for. This bill adds another $2.4 trillion to our national debt. It will push the deficit to GDP ratio up to 7%, which you said when you were here before was unsustainable, far from the 3% target that you described. If you look at your proposals taken together, there is no getting around the fact. There is no getting around the fact that the richest Americans receive an average tax cut of $300,000, which again, we're not paying for with the discretionary cuts that you advertise. So once again, we will have to borrow money in order to assist the people in this country who least need a tax cut at this moment, while the Americans who have been made miserable by the economy that they're in actually see income reduced because of cuts to Medicaid and cuts to SNAP. Meanwhile, and I think, Mr. Chairman, this is really important, meanwhile, interest rates are at 20-year highs. Moody's has slashed our credit rating because of the fiscal irresponsibility of this administration. The World Bank has cut our growth estimates in half, and the bond markets are screaming at us to stop. We now pay, and we are paying this year, more in interest than we are in the national defense. Secretary Besson, how can you square your concern with fiscal health with deficit finance growth for families that need those tax cuts least?
Senator, I'll begin with that we did not get here. We inherited this fiscal situation that I believe.
Well, you inherited from Donald Trump, who was here. You did, Mr. Besset.
No,
Yes,
sir.
you did, Mr.
No,
Besset.
sir.
You inherited from Donald Trump. He's the first president to come back after a 4-year hiatus, after we know exactly what the last tax cuts did, which was blow a massive hole in our deficit and debt. You can't sit here and lie about that. It's true. The data, to coin a phrase, the data shows that that's the result. The math shows that that is the result. No one on this side of the aisle admits anymore that or claims anymore that they didn't blow a huge hole in the deficit. They did. And now you're here saying to the American people, let's double down on that. We're going to give tax cuts for the wealthy. We are going to give tax cuts again to the wealthiest people in America, and we are going to finance it on the backs of the sons and daughters of teachers and firefighters and police officers all over this country, because we can't pay for it. Because the Treasury Secretary discovered somehow that domestic discretionary spending is only 15% of the budget, and therefore you can't balance it there.
Well, sir, we had a referendum on November 5th.
You
on
certainly
your
did. I agree
economic
with
policies. Your side lost.
I agree with that.
And a higher decibel
And
level.
I'm a rare Democrat who doesn't blame Donald Trump for winning. I'm sad he won. I don't blame him for winning. But don't come here.
In your statements,
go ahead.
They
Mr.
have
Sec-
veracity.
Go ahead, Mr.
So,
Secretary. What?
Higher decibel level does not give your statements more veracity.
My statements are true, if that's the word, if that's what you mean by veracity. My statements are true. You blew a massive hole in the deficit when your predecessor was sitting here under Donald Trump. And so the question is, can't we think of something better to do with the money than this debt, than drive up interest rates by borrowing money from our kids so the richest people in America can get a tax cut when they don't need it? That is the reality of your plan.
Well, sir, actually the high interest rates were achieved during the Biden administration in October of 2023, and we have not touched those rates since then. So
the higher interest rates.
No, your statement's incorrect.
I'm out of time, and I appreciate the indulgence of the chairman.
What struck me most about this exchange wasn't the volume or the tone. It was the clarity. Senator Bennet didn't show up to perform. He showed up to document reality in a political climate where reality is treated like an optional belief. The Trump-era official, armed with buzzwords about fiscal responsibility and urgent deficits, walked into that hearing with the same confidence so many GOP appointees have carried for years. A confidence built not on evidence, but repetition. But Bennet does what strong public servants do. He traces numbers back to their source. And when you follow the money trail, it leads exactly where he pointed, right back to the 2017 Trump tax cuts and the structural hole they blew through America's budget. Here's what that really exposes. When Bennet says, "You blew a massive hole in the deficit," he's not offering an opinion. He's referencing economic analyses, CBO projections, deficit reports, and the public record. Even Republicans stopped pretending those cuts paid for themselves. And yet, the same crowd now returns with a nearly identical proposal, just polished with new language and the same old promises. That contradiction matters. Because this isn't merely a debate over a spreadsheet. It's a debate over who gets protected and who gets sacrificed. Every dollar given to the top 1% has to come from somewhere, and Bennet lays it out plainly. Cuts to Medicaid, cuts to nutrition programs, cuts to clean energy, cuts that hit working families long before they hit the wealthy. And when the Trump-era official tries to dodge accountability by pointing to discretionary spending, Bennet stops him cold. Because pretending the deficit comes from school lunches or environmental programs instead of trillions in tax giveaways is not serious policy. It's political theater. Listen closely, this is the tell. When the official claims high interest rates happened during the Biden administration, he's ignoring the basics. Interest rates rise because deficits rise. And deficits rise when you cut revenue and expand borrowing to fund tax breaks no one asked for except donors and lobbyists. What Bennet exposes, line by line, is a Republican strategy we keep seeing. Break the budget, blame Democrats, then propose more tax cuts as the solution to the crisis they created. This isn't left versus right. This is truth versus spin, democracy versus distortion. And here's the emotional core. Bennett's frustration isn't partisan anger, it's patriotic responsibility. He knows working Americans are being asked to pay more, sacrifice more, and expect less, all while the wealthy collect windfalls and political leaders pretend this is fiscal discipline. This is why hearings matter. They become the rare places where the truth can still be placed on the record. And once it's there, it cannot be erased. Because accountability isn't just about calling out a lie, it's about making sure the country sees the pattern behind it. And if we stop paying attention, we lose more than elections. We lose the truth itself.